In 1749, the town of Alexandria was formally established along the western bank of the Potomac River, positioned within Fairfax County, Virginia, where colonial planners recognized its strategic access to deep water and overland trade routes for regional commerce. The location allowed vessels from the Atlantic to reach its wharves while connecting inland plantations to export markets, creating a geographic advantage that distinguished Alexandria from smaller upriver settlements lacking consistent navigable depth and direct maritime linkage. Early developments centered on a grid of streets, warehouses, and docks, reflecting British colonial urban design principles that prioritized efficient movement of goods, administrative order, and the projection of economic stability within a growing imperial system. Tobacco quickly became the dominant commodity passing through Alexandria's port, cultivated extensively on surrounding plantations and inspected before shipment, tying the town's fortunes directly to agricultural cycles and fluctuations in transatlantic demand from British markets. Merchants, factors, and ship captains formed an interconnected commercial network, coordinating credit, storage, and export logistics, while imported goods such as textiles, tools, and ceramics flowed back into the region, reinforcing dependency on imperial trade structures. The town's population grew steadily through the 1750s, including planters, artisans, laborers, and enslaved Africans, whose forced labor underpinned both agricultural production and urban construction, embedding inequality into Alexandria's economic and social foundation. Religious and civic institutions developed alongside commerce, with churches, meeting halls, and local governance bodies shaping community life, while reinforcing hierarchical norms that reflected both Anglican influence and colonial legal frameworks governing property and status. By the outbreak of the French and Indian War in 1754, Alexandria's strategic position gained military significance, serving as a logistical point for British operations in the interior, further integrating the town into broader imperial conflicts and administrative priorities. Roads extending from Alexandria into the Virginia countryside facilitated the movement of goods and information, strengthening its role as a regional hub where agricultural output converged before export, illustrating how geography directly structured economic organization. The presence of enslaved labor remained central, not only in plantations but within the town itself, where individuals were hired out for skilled and unskilled work, contributing to urban growth while being denied autonomy and legal recognition. Local governance evolved through appointed officials and town trustees who regulated trade, maintained infrastructure, and enforced ordinances, reflecting a political structure that balanced local interests with allegiance to British colonial authority. As tensions with Britain increased during the 1760s, merchants in Alexandria responded to imperial taxation policies, including the Stamp Act, by participating in non-importation agreements that demonstrated growing political coordination among colonial commercial centers. These economic protests revealed the interdependence between trade policy and local livelihoods, as restrictions disrupted established supply chains, forcing merchants and consumers to adapt while deepening resistance to external control over colonial commerce. By the early 1770s, Alexandria had become an active participant in the broader movement toward independence, with local committees organizing communication, enforcing boycotts, and aligning the town with revolutionary sentiments spreading throughout Virginia. The American Revolution transformed Alexandria's role, as its port supported military supply efforts while trade patterns shifted under wartime constraints, reducing exports and increasing reliance on domestic networks for essential goods and materials. British naval presence along the Potomac created uncertainty, limiting maritime activity and exposing the vulnerability of coastal towns, while local militias and defenses reflected the need to protect economic infrastructure during prolonged conflict. Following independence in 1783, Alexandria entered a period of adjustment, as former colonial trade relationships dissolved and new national frameworks emerged, requiring merchants to re-establish connections within a changing Atlantic economy. The town became part of the newly formed United States, integrating into federal systems of taxation and regulation, while maintaining its regional importance as a commercial center linking Virginia's agricultural hinterland to broader markets. In 1791, Alexandria was incorporated into the District of Columbia, reflecting its proximity to the new federal capital, a political shift that altered governance structures and connected the town more directly to national administrative developments. This inclusion brought both opportunity and tension, as residents navigated federal oversight while preserving local economic interests, illustrating the complex interaction between emerging national authority and established regional identities. Throughout these decades, Alexandria's growth remained tied to its geographic position and commercial functions, demonstrating how location, labor systems, and political change collectively shaped its trajectory within the evolving American landscape. By 1800, the town stood as a structured port community, its streets, institutions, and economy reflecting decades of adaptation, while underlying inequalities and dependencies continued to influence its long-term development and social organization. Following the conclusion of the American Revolution, Alexandria entered a period of recalibration during the 1780s, as merchants and civic leaders sought to redefine commercial relationships within an independent republic no longer governed by British imperial regulations. Trade patterns shifted as access to British markets became less predictable, prompting local merchants to diversify partnerships with Caribbean and European ports, while also strengthening domestic exchange networks along the eastern seaboard and inland territories. The port's infrastructure, including wharves and storage facilities, required adaptation to accommodate new goods and fluctuating volumes, reflecting how economic uncertainty translated into physical and logistical changes within the town's commercial environment. Agricultural production in the surrounding Virginia countryside also evolved, with some planters gradually reducing reliance on tobacco in favor of mixed crops, responding to soil exhaustion and changing market conditions that influenced Alexandria's export composition. This transition affected labor demands, as enslaved workers continued to form the backbone of plantation and urban economies, their forced labor sustaining productivity while reinforcing entrenched systems of inequality that remained largely unchallenged during this period. Alexandria's civic institutions expanded their functions, addressing infrastructure maintenance, public order, and economic regulation, as local governance adapted to the responsibilities of operating within a sovereign nation rather than a colonial administrative framework. The town's incorporation into the District of Columbia in 1791 marked a significant political development, placing Alexandria within the jurisdiction of the new federal capital and altering its administrative alignment within the broader national structure. Geographically, this integration positioned Alexandria at the southern edge of the federal district, adjacent to the Potomac River, reinforcing its role as a gateway between the capital and the agricultural regions of Virginia. The proximity to emerging federal institutions created opportunities for increased commerce, as demand for goods and services rose with the establishment of government offices and the influx of officials, laborers, and associated economic activity. However, inclusion in the federal district also introduced regulatory complexities, as local residents navigated new legal frameworks that sometimes conflicted with established commercial practices and regional economic priorities. During the 1790s, Alexandria maintained its function as a port of entry, handling imports such as manufactured goods and exports including grain, flour, and other agricultural products, reflecting a gradual diversification beyond its earlier tobacco dependence. Shipbuilding and repair activities contributed to the local economy, supporting maritime operations and providing employment for skilled laborers, while reinforcing the town's identity as a functioning and adaptable port within a competitive regional network. Social structures within Alexandria remained hierarchical, shaped by wealth, occupation, and legal status, with enslaved individuals occupying the lowest position, their presence integral to both domestic and commercial spheres. Free black residents, though limited in rights, formed small communities within the town, participating in certain trades and religious institutions, illustrating the complex social dynamics that characterized urban life in the early republic. Religious organizations continued to play a stabilizing role, offering not only spiritual guidance but also contributing to education and community cohesion, while reflecting broader cultural influences present within Virginia society at the time. The political climate of the 1790s, influenced by debates between Federalists and Democratic Republicans, reached Alexandria through local discussions and affiliations, linking the town to national ideological divisions shaping governance and policy. Economic fluctuations, including periods of reduced trade, exposed vulnerabilities inherent in Alexandria's dependence on external markets, prompting efforts to strengthen internal resilience through diversified commerce and local enterprise development. Infrastructure improvements, such as road maintenance and expansion, facilitated better connections between Alexandria and inland producers, enhancing the efficiency of transporting goods and reinforcing the town's position within regional trade networks. Despite these advancements, competition from other ports along the Chesapeake Bay and Potomac River posed ongoing challenges, requiring Alexandria's merchants to remain adaptive in pricing, services, and logistical coordination to maintain relevance. The presence of federal authority within the district brought occasional tension regarding taxation and representation, as residents balanced local interests with the broader demands of national governance structures still in formative stages. By the close of the 18th century, Alexandria had established itself as a stable yet evolving port town, shaped by geographic advantage, economic adaptation, and political transformation within the early United States. These developments laid a structural foundation that would influence Alexandria's trajectory into the 19th century, as patterns of trade, governance, and social organization continued to evolve within the constraints and opportunities of its environment. As the 19th century began, Alexandria entered a period of measured continuity, maintaining its established role as a port while adapting to the expanding economic networks of the early United States between 1800 and the following decades. The town's location along the Potomac River continued to define its function, providing a navigable route that linked inland agricultural producers to coastal and international markets, reinforcing its geographic importance within regional commerce. Trade increasingly reflected diversification, with flour, wheat, and other grains surpassing tobacco in prominence, signaling a broader agricultural transition in Virginia that reshaped Alexandria's export economy and reduced dependence on a single commodity. Local mills and processing facilities expanded to handle grain production, adding value before export and creating additional layers within the economic system, where production, processing, and shipment became more integrated within the town's operations. Merchants adapted to these changes by forming new commercial relationships, extending credit, and coordinating shipments across a wider network of ports, illustrating the growing complexity of early American trade practices beyond colonial-era patterns. Despite economic adjustments, enslaved labor remained deeply embedded in Alexandria's structure, supporting both urban trades and surrounding agricultural production, while continuing to define the limits of social mobility and personal autonomy for a significant portion of the population. The domestic slave trade became increasingly visible during this period, with Alexandria serving as a point of transit, reflecting broader shifts in labor systems as demand moved toward expanding plantation economies in the Deep South. This development carried significant social consequences, as families were separated and individuals forcibly relocated, embedding long-term demographic and cultural impacts that extended beyond the immediate boundaries of the town. Alexandria's governance within the District of Columbia continued to influence its political environment, as federal oversight shaped legal and administrative practices while local authorities managed day-to-day civic responsibilities and economic regulation. Tensions emerged over representation and economic policy, as residents evaluated the benefits and limitations of remaining within the federal district, particularly when local interests appeared secondary to national priorities. Religious and educational institutions expanded modestly, contributing to community stability and offering limited avenues for social development, though access remained uneven across different segments of the population. The town's built environment evolved gradually, with improvements to streets, warehouses, and residential areas reflecting both population growth and the need to maintain functional infrastructure supporting commercial activity. Maritime activity remained central, with ships arriving and departing according to seasonal cycles, their cargoes reflecting both domestic agricultural output and imported manufactured goods that sustained local consumption.